Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're taking a look at a trainer who's going hunting for Licky in the open greatly with Shadow Tyranitar. Now, these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Gary Cabbage, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, Licky, its standard charge moves are Shadow Ball and Body Slam, and that's why this trainer is running Shadow Tyranitar. A Shadow Tyranitar with its Rock Dark typing is going to be a complete wall to both of those charge attacks. Now, this is definitely more of a team for fun than for climbing, but with triple shadows of Pidgeot, Dusknoir, and Tyranitar, we should be in for some very fun games. So, without further ado, let's hop into the matches. We get a pretty neutral lead in the first match, Shadow Pidgeot into Shadow Kanto Ninetales. Ninetales is going to look to strike first as it fires off the Weather Ball, instant no shield from the Pidgeot, as the opponent safe switches into Tyranitar's target of Licky. Tyranitar going to be instantly no-shielding. It doesn't matter what Licky throws here. Body Slam, Shadow Ball, neither move is going to be doing a whole lot of damage. Now keep in mind, this is actively a Great League Shadow Tyranitar, so even resisted moves will add up. But Tyranitar is going to look to overfarm pretty massively and fire off the Stone Edge right before Body Slam number 3. Stone Edge is a very efficient attack. Licky no shields and pays a very heavy price. Opponent sends in Kingdra looking to get the farm down, but they're not able to get there. Tyranitar makes the brutal swing, gets a shield away from the Kingdra, and up a shield, this game is suddenly looking very, very good. In comes Shadow Dusknoir. Due to the Ghost subtyping, Kingdra's going to be forced to go for the more expensive Surf. Dusknoir puts up the shield, they get baited with the Swift. Oh, that is such a devastating bait, and now in comes the Ninetales. Weather Ball will do a lot of damage Shadow on Shadow, but Dusknoir will be able to hang on. Dusknoir now gets the double up on Shadow punches, and with the energy that's already stored on the Pidgeot, this game is over. Back in comes Kingdra. Dynamic Punch will guarantee the final Protect Shield, and then once they do, Pidgeot is about to absolutely shred with the Brave Bird. In comes Pidgeot, locked and loaded with the Shadow Brave Bird. That's going to be all she wrote. Kingdra easily gets one hit KO'd, and that's a good game. We move to game number 2. We've got the Battle of Flyers, Shadow Pidgeot into Mantine. Now, Mantine no longer running Ice Beam is quite nice for Pidgeot, as Water Pulse will do a decent amount of damage, but Pidgeot will be able to hang on. Water Pulse is going to connect. Pidgeot going to look to overfarm. There's an attempt at a catch, and in comes Licky. People love safe switching Licky in the Go Battle League. Licky is not a Pokemon that I frequently use myself, but I know that it is very, very popular, and we see back-to-back games right off the bat. Stone Edge is going to connect. Licky, oh, with the 1 HP survive. That's a little bit tragic, but Tyranitar will be able to survive the Body Slam and get the farm down. Tyranitar might get Wing Attack down by the Mantine, going to pivot out and send in the Dusknoir. I believe the Wing Attack was actually transferred onto the Dusknoir, so Tyranitar was able to get 1 Dragon Breath, but didn't take any damage to do so. Twister will be shielded. Dusknoir, max overfarm, firing off the Shadow Punch. Mantine simply has too much energy, it cannot go to waste, so Mantine is forced to get the shield back. Dusknoir is going to be no shielding. Even a Water Pulse would fail to take the knockout. Water Pulse lands. In the back is Stunfisk, but that is not the Stunfisk I was expecting to see. Instead of the more common Unova Stunfisk, this is Galarian Stunfisk. Shadow Punch bait, able to get the shield. Dusknoir, able to hang on, 1 HP remaining, and make the last second Shadow Punch number 2. This will be getting nice damage out of the Stunfisk, but the game comes down to this. Can a resisted Shadow Brave Bird KO the Stunfisk? Stunfisk is very bulky. Brave Bird connects. Stunfisk falls. Pidgeot is debuffed. In comes Tyranitar to reset the debuff. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We see a terrible lead in the next match. Shadow Pidgeot into Unova Stunfisk. The Dusknoir save switch is answered with a Jump Bluff, and unfortunately this game is probably already over before it started. This team is so incredibly weak to Unova Stunfisk. The Dusknoir save switch was basically sent in the hopes the opponent did not have a good answer, because maybe if they stayed in with the Stunfisk and the Stunfisk got low, then maybe there's a chance that Pidgeot and Tyranitar could try and sweep in the endgame. If there's going to be any chance to win the game, the Stunfisk will need to be baited back out, and that's exactly what this catch does. Pidgeot even gets the Gust Sneak on the catch. It's an Energy Ball that's not going to do much, and now back in comes the Stunfisk. Stunfisk could have thrown the Discharge right away and denied this energy, but instead Stunfisk is just going to look to overfarm. Brave Bird lands. That does pretty nice damage onto the Stunfisk, and the Stunfisk fires off a Discharge. Stunfisk probably could have Thundershock down there. I think had they thrown the energy right away, or had they farmed down, either would have been better than what they ended up doing. Now back in comes the Dusknoir. They end up firing off a Mud Bomb on alignment, but that just gives a free Astonish over the Dusknoir. Dusknoir makes the Shadow Punch, but a devastating catch from the opponent back onto the Jump Bluff. Jump Bluff will get knocked out, and unfortunately, that Stunfisk still being alive is very, very bad news. Opponent's going to wait down the timer here. Timer hit 0. In the back is Shadow Celio, and this is going to be a very tricky game to win. The Stunfisk also has banked energy stored in the back. Celio full sends the Surf. Tyranitar will be able to double up on Brutal Swings. The Dragon Breaths are shredding through Celio's health bar. Tyranitar is doubled up. Switch Clock is available for the opponent. Brutal Swing is going to be launched. There's the switch and the catch onto the Stunfisk. Tyranitar goes for the full undercharge on the Brutal Swing. That's going to do less than nothing, but wait, there's a chance. The opponent threw energy. If they take the knockout, Dusknoir may be able to get the farm down. In comes Dusknoir. Dusknoir gets the Astonish down. 1 HP remaining. Dynamic Punch is loaded, and this game will end in a win. Shadow Pidgeot, Shadow Tyranitar core led into Unova Stunfisk, and somehow was able to emerge victorious. Neutral lead in the next match, Shadow Pidgeot into Kanto Ninetales. Opponent safe switches into Furret, and it's going to fire off the Swift before the Air Cutter is available. In comes Shadow Tyranitar. Tyranitar, I don't think can quite knock out here with the Brutal Swing. It would have been very close, but Furret is very bulky. So Tyranitar is going to be shielding up the Brick Break, and now Tyranitar can honestly look to overfarm massively. Tyranitar will easily be able to take the knockout with Brutal Swing, and Furret is never going to be able to make a play for switch advantage. The opponent can't even really bring in the Ninetales here. They're sending in their final Pokemon, which is Licky, and they are so core broken by the Tyranitar. Stone Edge, no shield, devastating damage. Tyranitar is going to make it to another Brutal Swing, but the opponent does not go for the CMP tie. Instead, they're just going to put up the shield. Could potentially try and go for a Body Slam catch on a Dusknoir, but unfortunately, it's not to be. Licky's just going to fire off Body Slam, KO the Tyranitar, and now Pidgeot is brought back onto the field, and it does have the Air Cutter banked. This is going to guarantee the final shield out of the Licky, waits the turn, tries for the catch on a Dusknoir, but it's unsuccessful. The energy is preserved, and in comes the Kanto Ninetales. Shadow Ball will always do more onto the Dusknoir, so Dusknoir is going to be no shielding. Oh, it is actually the non-Shadow Ninetales. I stayed corrected. The Shadow on the Pidgeot is just absolutely everywhere, so it made me think that it was the Shadow Ninetales, but it actually isn't. It's just the regular Ninetales. But this game could get a little bit complicated, as now Pidgeot's going to have to try and gust everything down. Question is Licky in one gust range? No, it is not, but the Air Cutter is now available. The residuals on Gust for Pidgeot are going to be game-winning as Pidgeot wins charge attack priority over Licky. I was a little bit uncertain there for a second. I thought that all was lost, but Shadow Pidgeot just too good, still able to get the win. We've got some spice from the opponent in the next match. Shadow Pidgeot into Shadow Dragonair. Pidgeot gonna farm up, go for the catch. Oh, tell me this is a wrap. It is the wrap, double resistant catch. But unfortunately, it's bad news as out comes Mandibuzz. The Mandibuzz player, however, instantly makes a catastrophic error. They're in such a dominant matchup, there's absolutely no reason to ever fire off the foul play there right away. What they should do is farm to 100, absorb energy, and then take the knockout. That way they could have exited with a ton of energy. But by throwing that charge attack so quickly, they were in such a dominant matchup, and they basically gained no advantage out of it. Now Tyranitar is on the field, it's launching Stone Edges, and even though Mandibuzz is very bulky, that's still going to pick up the KO. Back in comes Dragonair, and hopefully this means they're very weak to Tyranitar. They're either very weak to Tyranitar, or they have a very good answer to Pidgeot in the back, and they want to try and preserve it. Dragonair does put up the shield, Tyranitar going to shield right back, opponent will not let the farm down, they should pivot out here, and it's because they had a very strong answer in the back as the Azumarill hits the field. This is very unfortunate, Tyranitar launches Stone Edge, able to land that, but unfortunately Tyranitar will get KO'd. Back in comes the Pidgeot, firing off an Air Cutter bait, hoping to try and get the shield, but the opponent makes potentially a game-winning bait call. This Azumarill is absolutely loaded on energy. Azumarill fires off the Ice Beam, Pidgeot will put up the shield. Pidgeot needs the farm down, but it's just not going to happen. The Azumarill makes Ice Beam number 2, knocking out the Pidgeot. So close to a win, but the opponent made an insane bait call, and that was game-winning. We move to the next match, Shadow Pidgeot into Shadow Typhlosion. Aggressive pivot into Shadow Dusknoir. They're going to bank a Blast Burn for later and send in Jumpluff. This is a very scary spot to be in, because even Tyranitar, which does have a Fire Resist, is not going to want to take energy from the Typhlosion. Shadow Dusknoir going to be no shielding as they fire off Energy Ball. Energy Ball is going to be getting this Dusknoir very low, and unfortunately Dusknoir will fall to the Fairy Wind. But now Pidgeot can hit the field. Pidgeot over farming, firing off Air Cutter, hoping with the gust damage that Air Cutter will be enough to secure the KO. And it does take the knockout. They still have so much energy stored on the Typhlosion. Typhlosion doubles up, but the question is, did that gust take the knockout? If the gust KO'd, they're not going to get the second Thunder Punch. It did KO, and in the back is Kingdra. Pidgeot gets the double up on Air Cutters. This is a very big problem. Even if they end up calling a bait, they're going to lose way too much health. It looks like they're just going to end up double shielding, but that's still not going to win them the game, as once all shields are down, in comes the Shadow Tyranitar. This is a very easy shield for the Shadow Tyranitar as a Brutal Swing is now locked and loaded. Tyranitar would win this charge attack priority tie by an absolute mile, but even with the Swift Bait, they just simply cannot get there. Brutal Swing lands, Kingdra falls, game over. We move to the next game. Shadow Pidgeot going to be greeted on the lead, this time with a Jumpluff. This is a very nice lead matchup. Opponent save switches into Seaking. Pidgeot get a bank a ton of energy and then send in the Dusknoir. The opponent really didn't have a good opportunity to fire off an Icy Wind there. Drill Run is now straight 5, but Icy Wind is still 6 to the first. So as the Pidgeot player being up a turn, successfully banking an Air Cutter and then sending a Dusknoir actually ends up being a very nice play. Now, the opponent's best play is just to try and get a monster overfarm on the Jumpluff, because Shadow Dusknoir really can't output a lot of damage here, so if Jumpluff can exit close to 100 energy, that could potentially be a way for the opponent to try and get back in the game. They do overfarm, but in my eyes, they don't overfarm nearly enough. They're not exiting close enough to an Acrobatics, and now Pidgeot gets to re-hit the field. Pidgeot can now just go for a 1 shield at a massive overfarm, build to 100, take the knockout with the Air Cutter, and then a 30% chance at a boosted Brave Bird into whatever they have at the back, and clearly the opponent did not want that to happen, as they will resign the match. Shadow Pidgeot into Shadow Tyranitar, the save switch into Tyranitar, but it's a Smackdown Tyranitar. Look at the spice from the opponent. Unfortunately, Smackdown Tyranitar is one of the worst things this team could see. Gary thought he was core breaking with Tyranitar, but it looks like the opponent had the exact same idea. Opponent, very nice counting. They fire off the Brutal Swing right before that Brutal Swing is available, but he's going to put up the shield, and at the very least get his second shield back. So, all shields are down for the opponent. In comes Shadow Pidgeot, and it's crazy that the best answer to a Shadow Smackdown Tyranitar in this moment is a Shadow Pidgeot, but the gusts are actually adding up. Then again, so are the Smackdowns. Pidgeot exits with the Brave Bird so incredibly low. In comes Gourgeist, and Pidgeot transfers that Incinerate damage onto the Dusknoir. Dusknoir is going to get outpaced. Shadow Ball will take the knockout, but importantly, Pidgeot did not take that Incinerate's worth of damage. Now Pidgeot can re-hit the field, fire off the Air Cutter. This is going to be knocking out the Gourgeist, and now there's a chance at a boost. Will Air Cutter get the boost? No, it will not, but in the back is Ludicolo, and somehow this game is a win. They were so weak to flying in the back. Brave Bird KOs the Ludicolo, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, picking up a very good lead, Shadow Pidgeot into Seismitoad. Now, Seismitoad does have access to super effective damage with Icy Wind, but Icy Wind can never take the knockout here. So for Pidgeot, this is a very easy no-shield. Now Pidgeot can look to overfarm. Opponent save switches into their own Pidgeot. That's going to be immediately answered with the Tyranitar. The fact that the Pidgeot didn't build up to the Brave Bird makes you think they're on Twister, and they are. Twister lands, big damage onto the Tyranitar. Tyranitar not gonna bait, gonna be full sending to Stone Edge. Brutal Swing would not take the knockout here, but Stone Edge definitely will. Pidgeot falls, and back in comes the Seismitoad. But Seismitoad's gonna get shredded by this Brutal Swing. This will do quite a lot of damage. It's not gonna take the knockout by any means, but it will put Seismitoad very low. Aggressive pivot into the Pidgeot, answered with Fearow, and up this much energy, Pidgeot is in such a commanding position. Air Cutter gets the shield, Pidgeot gets the boost, and is able to make a boosted Brave Bird. This is going to be pressuring away the final Protect shield from the Fearow. The Peck takes the knockout. Shadow Dusknoir normally has an absolutely terrible time against Fearow, but up 2 shields, this Shadow Dusknoir is very well positioned. Dusknoir going to have to put up both shields in a matter of seconds, but now the Fearow should basically be energy dry. Just have to watch for a catch attempt from the opponent. They go for it. They do not get it. In comes the Fearow. There's the Dynamic Punch. And there's the top left. Hopping into the final match, Shadow Pidgeot into Guzzlord. One really good matchup for Guzzlord in the back, one pretty bad matchup for Guzzlord in the back, so seeing it on the lead is genuinely not the worst. They're going to fire off Brutal Swing, Pidgeot able to hang on. Will Pidgeot go for a bait? No, instead going to save the energy and send in Tyranitar. Unfortunately, Tyranitar is immediately hard punished with Empoleon. That is not where you want to be as the Tyranitar. Tyranitar fires off Brutal Swing, getting a shield from the Empoleon. Empoleon just looking to massively overfarm. Tyranitar able to make Brutal Swing number 2. They're going to be no shielding. Oh no, if they try and farm down, they're not going to get it. Tyranitar makes Brutal Swing number 3. The Empoleon is forced to give up both Protect shields, and the Empoleon should be in range of Air Cutter. So Pidgeot did trigger the charge attack priority tie. Empoleon has all the energy in the world, but they're only going to get 1 charge attack because the Air Cutter should take the KO. At least if it doesn't, it should just be TM'd off the Pidgeot, but it does actually take the knockout. The Guzzlord does have energy, and the opponent will fire off that energy right before the Air Cutter is available. Pidgeot's going to have to KO the Guzzlord and then hope that Shadow Dusknoir can win the 1 vs 1 matchup in the endgame. Air Cutter onto the Guzzlord. Will it take the knockout? Yes, it will. In the back, it's going to be Seaking. And if there's one thing I know about Seaking, it's that it cannot win neutral matchups. I know a lot of people love Seaking. A lot of people have really good success with it in the Open Great League. I cannot get it to work in the Open Great League. Even with the Icy Wind debuff, it's not going to matter. It's just too frail. The power level in the Open Great League, I view as just simply too much for Seaking to handle. Dynamic Punch takes the knockout and secures the win. All in all, I really enjoyed today's battle, so many thanks to Gary for the battle submission. Triple Shadow is always going to up the difficulty quite considerably because you have to be very mindful about where your Protect Shields are going. Every Pokemon on this team, I would argue, is a pretty shield-hungry Pokemon. Obviously, Shadow Tyranitar can't really take much of any damage, even when it's resisted. Shadow Dusknoir really likes shields, and so does Shadow Pidgeot. So, in each game, you have to be very, very particular about how you use those Protect Shields. And I feel like he was able to do a very nice job overcoming some very, very difficult situations. One aspect of the battles I did really want to highlight was the game in which he led ABA weak into Unova Stunfisk and was still able to get the win. How we play around ABA weaknesses has evolved quite considerably over time and as the switch timer gets shorter. The old conventional thinking was, oh, if I'm ABA weak to something, I just stay in, try and get it low, and then knock it out with the Mon that can actually beat it, and then set up my back Mon to sweep. But that strategy actually ended up backfiring more often than not, because if you ended up staying in a lead matchup where you were at a pretty big disadvantage, your opponent would recognize, oh, my lead Pokemon has value, and then they would end up pivoting it out the moment the first Mon had been KO'd. So the new conventional thinking around how to play around ABA weaknesses is actually to do something that used to be viewed as completely crazy, and that's pivoting in your only answer. Now, it sounds completely illogical, but the goal is you want to check and see, does your opponent have an answer to this Mon? If they don't, maybe they'll stay in the lead, you can get some damage on it, but if they do, then it becomes a high priority to then protect that Mon that you switched in. You're trying to preserve it and then switch back into your lead to bait back out the problem Pokemon. You're basically sacrificing the lead later on in the match, but the important thing is after they knock out the lead Pokemon, after you've pivoted back in, then they're switch locked, and then your Mon that can actually beat it will be able to take the KO, setting up your back Mon to sweep. So it's kind of an adjustment in terms of how people deal with ABAs, but I felt that it was very worth highlighting from a game theory perspective because people's thoughts on it have changed quite a bit, and I feel that the new way of playing around ABA weaknesses is way more successful than the old way of thinking. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video and my little rant about game theory, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.